nothing's quite predictable anymore. Life is one series of cataclysms after another. Life is one series of cataclysms after another. We're born. We're in a nice, safe environment. It's warm, we're comfortable, and we're protected. And then there comes the cataclysm of birth, in which someone rudely wakens us from this. And I can't imagine it's very pleasant, this birth business. And then there's the cataclysm of understanding, in which the world is this array of sounds and noises that suddenly start to click into understandability. And there is the cataclysm of understanding in our lives when we see faces and understand the cataclysm of talking. Then there is the cataclysm of movement in the world, in which at first we were flailing about and then we move purposefully from one place to the next. And then our childhood is sort of this cataclysm of learning how to move and how to be in our bodies. And this takes the form of youth soccer leagues and all sorts of things as we understand how it is that we are in this skin. Then there's the cataclysm of adolescence, where there are physical and social changes so overwhelming that they happen on a weekly basis. Things are happening to this skin. Things are happening to this social world. And it is an overwhelming cataclysm. And a lot of these things we hardly even remember. They were so strange and transforming that we hardly even remember. It is just about in adolescence that we begin to have dim memories of the changes and what it was like beforehand. And what the world appeared to be. I've said this a couple of times, but when I was 7 and 8, I thought that all adults were aliens. No, really, I thought they were really aliens. And then the world changes and more things happen. We go through adolescence. We get a full-time job. And a full-time employment changes us. All of a sudden, we're tired. A job sort of changes who we are. And we have to get identity from the hat that we have to wear in the job. And the job changes us. And it's a cataclysm. Those of us, the first time we go out to get a new job, sometimes we have to buy new clothes. And it's a changing of who we are. And it's a cataclysm. Then we have a relationship, and someone else is as important in our lives as we are. And that completely changes who we are. There is this thing that breaks who we are. We die to what we were. And we become a new thing. And then we have a child. Children change us. I don't know if you know this or not. Children change us sometimes, many times more than we want. And then we get older. And this body that was once a new thing becomes a problem. And there is the cataclysm of our own health. And then we get older. And then there is the cataclysm of loss, in which our world really changes. All of these things are really complete changes in how we move and think of the world and how we see the future. Where are we going on Tuesday? Where are you going on Tuesday? Are you going to the ball field to play a game? Are you going to school? Are you going to the doctor's appointments? Where are you going? What does the future hold? It all changes in these cataclysms. They are necessary as living things for the sprouting, for the seed, for the flower. They are the changes that are the business of life. And they are somewhat painful often. My son Ryan and his wife Terrell had a child that had some problems because Calvin, my grandson, was born early, and Calvin cried all the time, all night, for months. you have children, you know what that's like. It's okay. And after a while, you wonder whether it will ever stop. You wonder whether life will ever get back to normal. The answer is, of course, no. But the crying stopped, and Calvin was the nicest grandchild in the universe. Please remember that. But it changed them. It changed them. It sort of broke them in the way that the people we love break us. And then we come here and we consider our religious life. We go to Sunday school when we're small and we learn certain ideas and principles, and they change us a little bit. Then later on, maybe we join the church, maybe we have some sort of experience of commitment in which we understand that this is sort of a family that we are committed to, and we are in this business of faith together, and that we have chosen to follow Jesus Christ, and we stand up before some folks and we say some things that evidence the cataclysm of us choosing a path that we have not been on before. Then, not much changes. Then there are decades where religion perhaps becomes an abstraction, perhaps just a confusion, and that we become in some sort of religious circling pattern in which we come to church, we have the disciplines of our faith, but we don't get changed much. There aren't the regular revolutions that happen in the rest of our life. The rest of our life, we're having these cataclysms constantly, and we come here, and actually what we want here is no more cataclysms, thank you very much. If we could just come here and have it the same as it always is, that would be really helpful, because the rest of our life is a mess. And I wish I could say that's what it's all about. But unfortunately, there is something about our faith that needs a cataclysm too. Jesus had come, wasn't as immediately available anymore, and the disciples were sitting around at Pentecost. They're sitting by themselves, and they're sort of a little depressed. They're in the upper room. Maybe they're singing some songs, but they sure aren't going out into the world. And they're trying to figure out what to do, and something changes. And there is a rush of a mighty sound of a rush of a mighty wind, and there are tongues of fire, and all these images of, I have no idea what happened, but it was really pretty dramatic. It was more dramatic than people saying different languages here in church, and you're kind of going, what's going on? That was not only the wind and the fire and the different languages, but it was what they were saying that was perhaps most important. Sure, they were talking different languages, and sure, that's exciting. But if that's all it was, it would be like, oh, that was nice. It was what they were saying in the different languages that brought people hope and changed the world. They were talking about the future in a completely different way, in a completely different language. But the language didn't matter so much. We focus on that in Pentecost. We focus about, oh, that was really sort of dramatic. But what was it that was dramatic? It was the prophecy. It was the vision of the future. It was this passage from Joel, which gives people hope and leads them out into a different world. It was them saying to parents, it's going to be really strange, but your life will never be richer. It was people talking through the cataclysm that brings a deep sort of faith that changes us and changes the world we live in. Pentecost was not just the language, but it was the way people were talking about the future, because things change for each of us dramatically, and for all of us dramatically. Yeah, we have cataclysms in our life, but the culture goes through cataclysms too. We live in a world, if you go on Google and you look at New York City, Fifth Avenue, Easter Parade, 1900. Easter Parade, 1900. You'll see a big black and white picture of a whole street, Fifth Avenue, lined with horse and buggy. Way in the back, there's one car that you can see, one car on Fifth Avenue. Everything else is horse and buggy, 1900. Easter Parade, all horses. 13 years later, going to do this on Google. 2 or 3 of you are going to do this, I know. 13 years later, there's this picture, same sort of shot. 13 years later, no horses at all. No horses at all. The world had been completely revolutionized. All the people who made their living off of shoeing horses and doing all that horse business, what happened to that? All the new people that were in this the world was completely revolutionized in terms of how folks got around. Just in 13 years, the world was in a cataclysm of how transportation took place in those 13 years. That was in the past. We're in the midst of cataclysms now about the future, too. Amory Lovins is sort of a futurist and talks about what energy is going to be like in the future in his book called Reimagining Fire. Fire will be different in the future. For instance, in the third world, right now, this seems hard to believe, but there's about 1.3 billion people that don't have the lights and power that we sort of take for granted. And those people who don't have electricity, as we know it, spend about 1/5 of the world's consumption of petroleum. And for this privilege, they get less than 1% of the total lumens that energy could burn, because it's very inefficient kerosene sort of lighting. And their lives are filled with smoke and soot and kerosene and expense. And for 3 months of that kerosene cost, or just the 3 months of what that kerosene costs, they can buy one of these gadgets now, or they can have it bought to them. And this provides more light than their kerosene lantern does. Their lives in the next 15 years will be completely different. The consumption of things will be completely different in the next 15 years. All because of the changes that will happen to us. We were changing in our past. Our culture is changing dramatically all around us. We don't seem to notice it quite so much. What about our spirits? What about our spirits? What about our spirits? Are we ready for them to be changed? Are we ready to hear the wind? Are we ready to feel the fire in our lives? Are we ready to have new life that will help us to cope with these new cataclysms that we are predicting? Because things are going to be different. And God's power will be different with us. We will have new opportunities for connections with things and community. Who would have guessed that 15 years ago we have these things in our pockets, these little things that we talk to each other on constantly, and that we have more information than we know what to do with? 15 years ago, if you said that we would be looking at our hands more than anything else in the world, would you have believed that? No, and yet that is what happens in more than we want to talk about. And this passage from Joel that interprets this event talks about everybody is going to be changing. It's not just the young. It's going to be the young people. It's going to be the old people. It's going to be the presidents. It's going to be minimum wage slaves. It's going to be men and women. It's going to be everybody seeing visions, dreaming dreams, pouring out the Spirit, thinking about the future, being ready for how the Spirit of God will challenge them. Even at the end of time, 21st chapter of Revelation, way back at the end of the Bible, next to the last chapter of the Bible. You think it's all over and done with, and it's going to be all done. And in the next to the last chapter, God says, "Behold, I am making all things new." Still, it's not over. Even though it seems like a cataclysmic end, there is a God that is transformed, that comes to us and walks with us and inspires us. There's an exciting cataclysm waiting for us that changes our world and brings new opportunities for life. We may not understand it immediately. Nous ne pouvons pas comprendre immédiatement.
We know this because God had a cataclysm too. We have faith in the God who changed, the God who was walking amongst us, who was dead and is now transformed in resurrection. God had cataclysms and walks with us through ours.
So religious people gather together to talk about this thing that's going to happen, that's going to change the world. And sometimes we go, the end is near! Oh no, the end is near! The end is near! We have the opportunity at Pentecost to say the same thing in a completely different way. The end is near, and what is happening next is going to be fabulous. The end is near! Hallelujah! God, the end is near! The end of the old pain is over. The end of what was. The end of guilt is over. The end of what will hold us back is done. The end is near. Hallelujah. Amen.